G'day guys, Dean here from Blog for the Blood God, and welcome to this Red Corsairs Masterclass. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down everything from some of the really powerful combos that I've covered so far, some of the tournament results that I've achieved with the Red Corsairs, talking about the battle report that we did with the Red Corsairs, as well as going through every Warlord Trait, Stratagem, Relic, and rounding the video out with a list, just really breaking down every nook and cranny and getting every drip of power that we can out of the Red Corsairs. So with that being said, we're going to jump straight into the video.
Blog for the Blood God.
Alrighty guys, the best place to kick off when you're talking about a Legion Masterclass is talking about the various pros and cons to taking that Legion, because there are many options available. So let's talk about why you might want to take the Red Corsairs. Alright, their first pro is that they are a very fast army, making you able to establish board control early in the game. Their second pro is that they have great objective control and are fantastic at scoring victory points. And then their third pro is that they have a few unique and very cool tricks. However, they do come with their own cons. They don't hit as hard as other legions, and as a result, you can sometimes struggle to kill your opponent's hard targets. And they're not as durable as other legions, so you'll often end the game with no models left on the board. So this makes it a pretty well-rounded legion. There's lots of reasons why you might want to take it, but there are definitely some disadvantages that you're going to want to consider. One of the biggest disadvantages being that you will often get tabled by the end of the game. However, that's not that big of a deal if you scored plenty of victory points on the way. So Red Corsairs, in my opinion, are definitely up there as one of the strongest legions. Let's go through some of these pros and cons in a little bit more detail by talking about the various Warlord traits, stratagems, relics, etc. But let's kick off first with the Legion trait. Alright, so their Legion trait is called Raiders from the Maelstrom. Units with this trait are eligible to declare a charge in a turn in which they advanced, and models with this trait count as 2 models when determining objective control, or 5 models if they have a wound characteristic of 10 or more. Now, straight out the gate, this is 2 really powerful abilities. That advance and charge allows your units to be super fast and is really powerful on everything from bikers being able to go 20 inches and then charge, raptors, warp talons, possessed, even things like chosen or legionnaires disembarking out of their transports. They gain massive utility from the ability to advance and then charge. And then on top of that, every model counting as 2 models, or if it's 10 wounds or more, it counts as 5 models, means that your ability to control the objectives and dictate the victory points throughout the game is really powerful. You get those OBSEC legionnaires jumping out onto an objective, and the probability that you're going to take it off of your opponent is quite high. And combining that with the speed that you get from advancing and then charging, you disembarking out of a rhino, they're surprisingly fast. So your ability to just get onto those objective markers throughout the game and deny your opponent those victory points is really powerful and is key to success with the Red Corsairs. Alright, now let's talk about their unique secondary objective. Every legion has one. Some are really strong, some not so much. So let's break down the Red Corsairs. It's called Raid and Reeve. It's a bit wordy, so bear with me. But basically, if you select this objective, Red Corsairs Infantry and Red Corsairs Biker units from your army can attempt the following action: Raid and Reeve. 1 or more Red Corsairs Infantry Biker units from your army can start this action at the end of your movement phase. Each unit from your army that starts to perform this action must be in range of a different objective marker that has not been raided by your army. A unit cannot start this action while there are enemy units, excluding aircraft units, in range of the same objective marker. This action is completed at the start of your next command phase or at the end of the battle, whichever comes first, provided the unit performing it is still within range of the same objective marker. If completed, that objective marker is said to have been raided by your army, and until the end of the battle, the unit that performed the action is said to be carrying the spoils of war. Each unit from your army that completes the Raid and Reeve action, the objective marker that was raided as a result was wholly within your deployment zone, score 1 victory point. If the objective marker was wholly within your opponent's deployment zone, score 3 victory points. Otherwise, score 2 victory points. At the end of the battle, score 1 victory point for every Red Corsairs unit from your army that is carrying the spoils of war. Score 2 victory points instead if that unit or the transport models embarked in is wholly within your deployment zone. Alright, so this is a really interesting secondary objective. There's a few things that need to be broken down to really assess whether or not it's competitively viable. One thing is that it can be completed by one or more units. So you could move forward, and if there's 3 objectives roughly central, like maybe there's 2 close to your deployment zone and 1 in the center, you could theoretically go, cool, the bikes move onto the center, they're doing the action, 2 units of possessed move on to these ones, and they're doing the action, so you're doing it on all 3. And then any of those units that are still alive in your subsequent command phase will have scored you victory points and will be carrying the spoils of war. And then if those units are still alive at the end of the game, you will score an additional victory point, or if you're able to get back into your own deployment zone, 2 additional victory points. Now, this has potential to score quite high, particularly if you're still alive at the end of the game, because you could raise the spoils late game and still be alive, and then get your victory points. So there's a lot of things you can do there. It also means if you get into your opponent's deployment zone, you'll be able to get 3 victory points straight out the gate, and then if you're still there at the end of the game, that's a 4th victory point. It has a really high potential score. The challenge I have with this is it sort of relies on you being alive at the end of the game, which Red Corsairs are not particularly fantastic at. They can do it, but they're not amazing at it. Because generally speaking, the Red Corsairs are going to be leveraging that advance in charge and leveraging that double model OBSEC objective secured rule to make sure that they're denying objectives, charging into combat, those sorts of things. And if you're doing that, chances are you're playing a trading game where you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to move these Legionnaires onto your objective and stop you from scoring your primary points, but then you're going to kill me, right? And then I'm going to die. So if you're doing that back and forth, you're probably not going to have many units left alive at the end of the game, which means you're not going to get many points for the spoils. And chances are also, if you're doing this aggressive play, you're not going to be wanting to do actions with your durable units. You're going to be wanting to do damage with them, which means you're not going to be able to charge if you are doing the action. So I think it's a really cool secondary, and I think if you build your list specifically to achieve it and you build your whole game plan around it, you absolutely can max this out. You can get 15 relatively easily. I just think that the trade-off that you have in the way that you're doing less damage because you have to play conservatively in order to keep your units alive is going to end up, your opponent's just going to roll over you, because if you're not doing that damage to them, their ability to bring their whole army to bear and do damage to you is going to end up with a worse score than if you had instead took something like raise the banners high. Alrighty, let's talk about Warlord traits next. Red Corsairs only have 3, but there's some really interesting ones in here, so let's break them down one by one. First up, we have Reaver Lord. At the start of your command phase, if this Warlord is on the battlefield, roll 1d6. On a 4+, you gain 1 command point. So this is really interesting. So generally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of Warlord traits and stratagems and things like that that generate command points, because in the Nephilim environment, you actually have to spend a command point to unlock that trait. And even if it's something like this where you get it on a 4-up, over the course of the game, there's 5 turns. Even if you be conservative, you're probably going to generate 2 command points, and you have to spend 1. So it's a net gain of 1 command point. So that sounds really good. However, you don't dictate when you generate them. If you're rolling a random 4-up, you could generate 1 in the first turn and 1 in the second turn, or you might generate them in the 4th and 5th turns. And if you're generating them in the 4th and 5th turns, they're not as useful because you probably wanted to use them in the earlier turns. So sometimes it's better to just not spend the command point, and therefore you have access to that command point at any time, as opposed to being beholden to the random nature of the dice. That being said, this particular one I think can work depending on your list, depending on how you build it. If you have a character that's planning to sit back and he's definitely going to be there for the entire game, and you don't have any particular command points or particular stratagems that you're planning to use in the first turn, and you can afford to budget to spend 1 to get more throughout the game, then I think this has potential. So it really does depend on your build, but this one is definitely worth considering. Next up, we have Angel of Hatred. Each time this Warlord fights, if it made a charge move, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention this turn, then until that fight is resolved, add 1 to the strength and attacks of this Warlord. Alright, so this is just your standard, makes your character a bit more of a beat stick. These ones are always fun, they're always cool. However, I don't necessarily think they're competitively viable unless you're building some kind of layered, stacked, buffed character where he's got this Warlord trait and a sick relic, and he's got, you know, a stratagem or psychic powers that you're going to buff him up. Like, you put this on, say, a Dark Apostle, and then you also put, you know, the whatever it's called, the prayer that gives him the extra attacks, and then you also have a Psyker nearby that puts diabolical strength on him, and you send him in, he can do really good damage. Or you put this on, say, a Master of Executions, he can do really good damage. But often I find that spending that 1 CP, you're going to get better utility out of it with other stratagems, other relics, and other Warlord traits. So as much as I like the additional damage, I think you're better off with the stratagems that will buff entire units. Like, you compare this to, like, say, the Black Rune of Damnation, and it's chalk and cheese. It's so obvious that the Black Rune of Damnation giving an entire unit neg1 to wound is way better spend of a CP than giving one character an extra attack and strength. Alright, and last but not least, we have Dark Radar. Once per turn in your shooting phase, after shooting with a friendly Red Corsairs unit within 6 inches of the Warlord, that unit can make a normal move. If it does so, and that unit is not eligible to declare a charge this turn. Alright, so this one's really interesting. It's kind of like a fire and fade, and you can use it on bikes. So what you could do is you could have bikes behind a ruin somewhere where they're safe, they could move out, shoot something, and then jump back in. That's also really interesting when you go, cool, if you make them, say, Mark of Tzeentch with an icon, they get +1 to their AP, and then you use the Demon Bolt stratagem, so now you're getting another +1 to AP, so you're getting AP 2 bolters. You can also put, say, Abaddon the Despoiler with them to get them reroll hits, so now they jump out, they're rerolling hits, they're high AP, you know, you can put Veterans of the Long War on them. There's a lot of things you can do to stack this and then bring them back in to be safe, and just keep doing that back and forth. The only challenge I have with that is that the shooting, even with all of those buffs, isn't particularly scary, and you can make bikes quite durable. So you don't really need to keep protecting them. I think the Red Corsairs, this is a shooting style Red Corsairs stratagem or Warlord trait. I think they lean more into the combat style of Red Corsairs. So I think you're better off, instead of going with the whole I'm going to shoot and move play, I think you're better off going with the whole I'm going to move, advance, charge. Alrighty guys, so that's the 3 Red Corsairs Warlord traits. Let's talk about the relics now. They actually have some pretty spicy stuff in here, so let's break them down one at a time. Alright, first up we have the Maelstrom's Bite. Red Corsairs model with a combi melter only. This relic replaces the combi melter and has the following profile. It's got 2 profiles, you can select one or both, basically standard combi melter deal. The bolter is 24 inches range, rapid fire 1, strength 4, AP 1 and 2 damage. So it gets an extra pip of AP and an extra damage over a regular bolter. But the interesting one is the Warp Twisted Melter Gun. So it's 18 inches range, so longer range than a standard melter gun. It's assault 1, strength 9, AP 4, and it's D6 plus 2 damage. So normally you'd have to be within half range to trigger that +2, but this guy gets it at full range. Alright, so I'm typically a huge enemy of any upgraded shooting weapons, because relics to upgrade shooting weapons are traditionally really bad, because you generally, characters are combat. Even in your, shooting based armies, characters generally provide either a buffing aura kind of role or a combat punchy kind of role. They very rarely focus on doing actual shooting damage, with the notable exception of Tau, of course. However, there is a really interesting trick that you can do with this specific shooting relic that I think actually puts it into the realms of viability. Murderous Perfection for 1 CP. Use this stratagem in your shooting phase or in the fight phase when a Traitorous Astartes Slanesh unit from your army is selected to shoot or fight. Once during that phase, when resolving an attack made by a model in that unit, you can change the result of one hit roll, wound roll, or damage roll to be a 6. Note that if a D3 is rolled, blah blah blah. So the reason I bring this stratagem up is with that Maelstrom's Bite, you can go, cool, I'm going to use this Murderous Perfection stratagem if you've got like a Slaneshi character that has a combi melter, and now you roll the hit, and if you fail to hit, you can just go, cool, I'm going to turn that into a 6, so it's now a hit, and it's also likely an additional hit depending on which act of wanton destruction, slaughter, massacre you're in. So you can turn it into 2 hits, which is really powerful, or if you do hit, you can then roll to wound, and if you fail to wound, well, you can turn it into a successful wound. Or even better, if you successfully hit, successfully wound, then when you go to roll that damage roll, you don't roll d6 plus 2, you just score 8. And being able to just do 8 damage reliably and consistently like that makes this a fucking terrifying piece of tech that you can have hidden in your army. You can have a character within a unit of possessed or terminators or bikers or whatever unit of choice you have. You've got a character in there who's safe, and your opponent knows that that character can move 6 inches, potentially advance, and then shoot his melter gun because it's an assault weapon, and do 8 damage to something. So all of their characters have to be very scared and very careful, and even the bigger, chunkier kind of units have to be scared because this is strength 9, it's AP 4, so it's likely, if you hit, you are likely to wound, and they are likely to fail their save, provided they don't have a powerful invulnerable. And then you're just doing 8 damage. This is actually kind of spicy. I don't necessarily think I would take it in a competitive list, but I wouldn't look the other way if somebody did. I'd be like, yep, cool, I respect that. You have to respect it. You can't play into your opponent if they have this and not be prepared for it. So Maelstrom's Bite is a really interesting tech piece. I would love to know what you guys think of this one. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that this sort of combo is something that's worth having a rhino with a character inside it who's able to disembark out his 9 inches and then just blast something? What do you think? What characters would you put this on? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, the next relic is called Armor of Badab. So it's a Red Corsairs Terminator model only. The bearer has the following ability. While the Red Corsairs core or Red Corsairs character is within 3 inches of the bearer, Terminator models in that unit have a 4-up invulnerable save, and non-Terminator models in that unit have a 5-up invulnerable save. Alright, this one's not particularly powerful, and the reason I say that is because in the Armor of Contempt environment that we're existing in now, it's kind of irrelevant because most of the time your Marines, your standard Marines, are going to be getting a 5-up save anyway, and most of the time your Terminators are going to be getting a 4-up save anyway. You have to be pretty high AP to push through that, particularly if you're leveraging cover saves and things like that. I could see this having some utility on things like cultists, but still, I don't necessarily think it's worth it, particularly given that in order to take this, you would need to take a Terminator character, and they're not the most powerful characters, let's face it. So I think this is one that we're going to have to shelve for now. Alright, last but not least, we have the Traitor's Laurels. Red Corsairs model only. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the bearer. Once per battle, if the bearer is selected for an epic deed stratagem, that stratagem costs 0 CP, and the bearer has the following ability. Traitor's Laurels Aura, while a friendly Red Corsairs model core unit is within 6 inches of the bearer, each time a combat attrition test is taken for that unit, ignore any or all modifiers to that combat attrition test. Alright, so this one's got 3 parts to it, right? The +1 attack, that's cool, but like I said earlier, I think you're more often better to put your stratagems into things that are going to be buffing nearby units. Now, the other relic is called the Mantle of Traitors, and basically, once per battle, if the bearer is selected for an epic deed, the stratagem costs 0, so it's exactly the same in that regard. However, instead of getting +1 attack, with this one, each time the bearer makes a melee attack, you can reroll the hit roll, so sort of works out to be roughly 1 extra attack, because if you're going to be hitting on 2s, you're probably going to miss once, but then you get to reroll it, kind of like getting an extra attack. The difference is that for this one, at the start of your command phase, you select 1 Legion core unit from your army that's on the battlefield, and until the start of your next command phase, they are considered to be in range of any of the following aura abilities that the bearer has: Lord of Chaos, Aspire to Glory, or Demagogue. So it effectively works out to do the same thing. The part that changes is you swap out the combat attritions component of the Red Corsairs specific relic for a aura buff that you can project across the battlefield. So this means that if your bikers move in, they advance, they charge, and they're ages away from, say, a Demon Prince, if he has this Warlord trait, or this relic, he can project his reroll 1s to hit aura onto them from across the battlefield. So I think this one is just objectively better, and as a result, I don't think you'll see the Red Corsairs version taken in any competitive lists. And if you do take it, it's probably just because you want to take Red Corsairs stuff because you're a Red Corsairs player, which is nothing wrong with that. However, if you want to make your list that slight little bit more competitive, then this is the way to go. Alright, now let's talk about the Red Corsairs specific stratagems. They've got some really interesting stratagems in here as well. Some are a little bit expensive, but they're all very interesting, so let's talk about them now. Alright, first we have Secure the Prize, 1 command point. Use this stratagem in any phase when a red Corsair's core unit from your army is within range of an objective marker is selected as the target of an attack. Until the end of the phase, each time an attack with a damage characteristic of 1 is allocated to a model in that unit, add 1 to the armor saving throw made against that attack. So this is really good because it does stack with Armor of Contempt, it does stack with cover saves, and it's obviously really powerful on something with a 2-up save because you can basically, even if they're AP3, you could potentially still be getting that 2-up save against it. So really, really powerful in certain situations. However, it's not necessarily that much single damage attacks out there in the game, and even the ones that there are generally not that scary. So if you're getting shot with single damage attacks, chances are you're probably not stressing about it to the point where you would be spending command points to buff that durability. It's definitely a stratagem you want to keep in mind so that in certain situations when it does come up, you are prepared to use it, but it's not something that I think is going to be used frequently. Next we have Rain, Fire and Death. 2 command points. Use this stratagem in your command phase if a red Corsair's character unit from your army is on the battlefield. Select 1 point on the battlefield, place a marker at that point. At the start of your next command phase, roll 1d6 for each unit within 6 inches of the center of that marker, adding 1 if the unit is within 3 inches of the center of the marker, and subtracting 1 if the unit being rolled for is a character. On a 2 to 5, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. On a 6+, the unit suffers D6 mortal wounds. The marker is then removed. You can only use this stratagem once. Alright, so this one's really expensive, 2 command points, so really it's got to do a lot. If you're going to be spending 2 command points on something, it needs to be almost game winning. It needs to be able to switch the tempo of the game up massively, and I just don't see this stratagem doing it. The fact that you place the marker and it doesn't trigger until your next command phase means that your opponent's going to have an opportunity to move out of the way. So it could be useful for clearing your opponent off of an objective, that sort of thing, but ultimately I think most people are probably just going to cop a couple of mortals, and realistically you're not going to be spending 2 CP to do a couple of mortals. And if they are particularly worried about it, they'll just move out of the way, which means this stratagem is going to get very little utility in my opinion. Next we have Hounds of Huron. Use this stratagem in the fight phase after a red Corsair's biker unit from your army is fought. If that unit is within engagement range of enemy units, it can fall back as if it were your movement phase. Otherwise, it can make a normal move as if it were your movement phase. Alright, so this is the stratagem that I was talking about in my Red Corsairs Insane Biker Combo video. It's really, really powerful, so if you want to learn a little bit more about this stratagem, check that video out. But basically what it allows you to do is move in, fight something, and then fall back before your opponent strikes, which is really powerful. Or if you move in and kill the unit, you can then move again, which is also obviously really powerful. It's also worth noting that you can do this reactively, so if you're a Marcus Slanesh biker unit, you can, in your turn, you can do it, or in your opponent's turn. You fight first, so you strike before them, and then you can fuck off before they attack you. So really, really powerful stratagem, this one. Next we have Raid Supply Lines. This is another 2 command point stratagem. Use this stratagem at the start of the reinforcement step of your opponent's movement phase if a red Corsairs Warlord from your army is on the battlefield. If it is the first or second battle round, you can select one of your opponent's strategic reserves reinforcement units. That unit cannot arrive on the battlefield this phase for any reason, even if it has another rule that states it always arrives on the battlefield during a specific battle round, for example Drop Pod Assault. You can only use this stratagem once. Alright, so this one's really expensive, 2 command points, but this is one of the ones that can be game changing. If your opponent's planning to drop in a big unit of Zephyrim or unit of Terminators or you name it, some Scions or Blood Angels, Sanguinary Guard, or they've got something and they're planning to drop in and do massive damage to you, you can actually just go 2 CP, no, you can't bring that unit on. So this can be really powerful, and what this also allows you to do is take a little bit more time setting up your screens and getting that board control established, because you can push them back into the later turns of the game. So this is a really powerful stratagem. In certain matchups it's going to be amazing, but in other matchups it's going to be completely irrelevant. So it's definitely one you want to get familiar with and definitely one you want in your toolbox, but like with many of the other stratagems, it's not something that you're going to be using frequently. Alright guys, so that's all of the Warlord traits, the Relics, the Stratagems, the Legion trait, and the secondary objectives covered, all of the unique stuff for the Red Corsairs. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about an army list. Now this army list is an evolution, an iteration of the same list that I used in a previous battle report on this channel, and of the same list that I ran at a recent event. So I've got plenty of sort of information has fed into this list, and I've refined it down to being something that I think is actually competitively viable. That being said, I haven't had an opportunity to test this one on the battlefield yet. So if you want to see it in practice, a similar list to this, check out the battle report, check out my tournament review. But yeah, taking on board some of the ideas that were developed in those videos, I've come up with this new updated and upgraded army list for the Red Corsairs. So we've got a Master of Possessions. He has Pact of Flesh, Mutated Invigoration, Liber Hereticus, Mark of Slaanesh, and Reaver Lord. So that's going to give him, the Reaver Lord gets him the generating of the command points. Liber Hereticus allows him to cast 3 powers. Mutated Invigoration he's going to use to put +1 toughness on the bikers or the possessed. Mark of Slaanesh will allow him to also put Delightful Agonies on those bikers. And Pact of Flesh is going to be really critical in this, in the way that he's going to be able to resurrect the bikers, resurrect the possessed, but also resurrect things like Legionnaires and Cultists to gain that additional movement. Then we have a Demon Prince. He has Wings, Mark of Tzeentch, Mantle of Traitors, Warp Time, and a Hellforged Sword. Now the reason he's gone Mark of Tzeentch is so that he can cast a psychic action and a psychic power. And Mantle of Traitors will allow him to use the Epic Deed stratagem to do that for free. So basically he's planning to do that in almost every game, so that's made Mantle of Traitors worthwhile. He will also then be able to project his reroll 1s to hit across the battlefield to anybody that he can see. So he can put it on the possessed, he can put it on the bikers, and he can buff them up. Then he also has Warp Time so that he can Warp Time up certain units around the table. So he can make those Legionnaires fast with their objectives secured. He can make the Chosen fast. While they can't charge after this, what it does mean is that you'll be able to toe in on objectives and take them off your opponent. Then we have a Dark Apostle. No Marks of Chaos on this lad, just Illusory Supplication for that. Can't be hit on a 1, 2, or a 3, and can't reroll to hits, which is going to first turn, put on the bikes, send them in, and then he's going to move up with the possessed, and in subsequent turns he'll put that buff on them. In our troop slot, so we've maxed out troops here because I think one of the strengths of the Red Corsairs is their objective secured and board control. So we've got 4 units of 5 Legionnaires, 2 of which have the Balefire Tome. Now you can put whatever powers you want on these. I'm thinking probably just Prescience for both. They're mainly there because they get extra denies, extra smite potential, and Prescience is a really clutch power that you can sort of layer in as well. Then we have 2 units of 10 cultists. They're there for raising banners, screening out your backfield, and creating protective bubbles around your more vulnerable but damage dealing units like the bikers and the possessed. In our elite slot, we have 10 possessed in one big unit. They're there to sort of ferry around that Dark Apostle and be a bit of a midfield bully, supported by 2 units of 5 chosen with the Mark of Slaanesh and a Chaos Icon. These guys are going to be hitting on 2s, decent amounts of damage, and also because they have the Mark of Slaanesh, we can put Delightful Agonies on them as well, so they're another candidate. Then in our fast attack, we have the unit that makes the Red Corsairs, in my opinion. It's a big unit of 9 bikers, Mark of Slaanesh, 1 with a flamer, and the Black Room of Damnation on the champion. Now, in the previous versions of this list, I've used Mark of Khorne and I've used Mark of Nurgle. The Mark of Nurgle unit is considerably tougher. However, the lack of Feel No Pain means that that Mark of Nurgle unit has a significant weakness, and that is anything that can dish out mortal wounds. So we're going with the Mark of Slaanesh instead. This is also going to give the unit the ability to fight first, which pairs well with the Red Corsairs stratagem that's going to allow them to fall back after they fight, and also allows them to fight first, and also allows them to get that Delightful Agony. So there's a lot of different things going on there. And then the Black Rune of Damnation obviously making this unit quite tough when they can be buffed up to toughness 6. Then in our dedicated transport, we have 3 Chaos Rhinos. So basically that's going to have, one of them is going to have a squad of Legionnaires and a Chosen. Another one's going to have another squad of Legionnaires and a Chosen. And then the third one is going to have 2 squads of Legionnaires. And basically this means you're going to be able to launch out either damage dealing models in the way of your Chosen, or objective secured models in the way of your Legionnaires, or a combination of the 2, depending on what the situation calls for. So a really powerful combo there. So yeah, that rounds out this masterclass on the Red Corsairs. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know if you'd like to see this list in practice, or whether you'd like to see me move on to the next Legion, which I'm thinking is probably going to be Word Bearers, but let me know in the comments below, and I will be doing a vote over on my Patreon. They get to pretty much dictate the next Legion. So check out the Patreon if you want to show your support. We've got a Discord channel where we do one-to-one coaching, as well as sort of group sessions where we talk through lists and we help each other out. It's absolutely fucking ripper of a community over there. And also, if you want to show your support, we've just launched a Teespring campaign where we're basically going to be selling off shirts that you can buy to show your support. I get a small amount off the top, and you get an amazing shirt with a Blog for Blood God logo like this one. And also, I have objective markers that you can purchase that have the same logos and all that sort of stuff. So if you want to show your support and get something back, we've started doing apparel. We've got dice on the way as well. They haven't arrived yet, but they will be coming soon. So show your support however you want, or if you want to, you can put a super thanks. It's essentially a way to attach a donation to a comment. You can just say, thanks mate, here's $1, appreciate the content. That's always appreciated. It allows me to continue to improve. I'm looking to get more lighting installed. As you can see, the lighting's a little bit better, but I want to step it up a little bit further. And I also need to get a few more cameras so that I can set up some multi-camera battle reports. And I desperately need a new microphone as well, because this one, even though it cost me $400, is crap. So let me know what you guys think. Please head over and show your support so that I can continue to improve this content. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.
Look for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
Do your objective markers ever get lost behind terrain or other models and become difficult to see? Do they ever get bumped and accidentally moved during a game? And do they ever spark arguments about distances? Well, not anymore. Introducing the Blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers. Made from the same material as astronaut suits, or maybe military equipment, or probably neither of those things, this 2mm thick neoprene synthetic rubber is tear resistant, water resistant, and is designed to last. But that's not all. The Blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers come in a variety of different designs and styles to suit any faction represented in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These objective markers are a perfect gift for yourself or a friend, and are a perfect way to flex and show your opponent that not only are you a smarter, cooler, and better 40k player than them, but you also have more disposable income than they do. For the low price of $25, you'll get not one, not two, but 6 neoprene objective markers, perfectly designed for 9th edition Warhammer 40k. But wait, there's more. For a limited time only, people who sign up on Patreon to support Blog for the Blood God as a Skull Champion tier $5 per month member will gain access to a custom design service where I will design a unique logo to support their gaming club, like the one I did to the left here for the Potato Farmers local gaming club here in Melbourne. Follow the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today.